Hello and welcome to Careers and Opportunities with NOAA, an ELI and NOAA co-sponsored webinar. My name is Chandler Randall and I am the Manager of Educational Programs here at the Environmental Law Institute, and I am so delighted to welcome everyone to today's webinar. ELI is proud to offer programming on cutting-edge issues in environmental law and policy, and it is truly such an honor to have you join us today for this special program. At the end of today's webinar, we will have time for a Q&A session, so please submit your questions through GoTo's question box, and please do not wait until the end. Send us your questions as soon as you think of them. I would like to thank our outstanding panelists for joining us today to lend their expertise to this webinar, and while we will have brief introductions, the full speaker bios are posted on our website, eli.org, and I strongly encourage you to check out their expertise and experience in more detail there. As we begin, I would like to very briefly introduce today's moderator, Molly Watson. Molly is the Deputy Section Chief at NOAA's Office of General Counsel in Alaska. Molly, we are so thankful to have you here with us today, and with that, I will turn things over to you. Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Chandler, and thanks for the introduction. I want to start by thanking ELI. We are also very excited to be co-sponsoring this event with ELI. We certainly appreciate their willingness to work with us, and we really appreciate all the support from the tech support to the outreach to help make this event happen. So thank you, ELI. I also want to thank our panelists, Andrea, Gladys, and Frank, who you will be meeting later. I'm privileged to be serving as a moderator for these expert panelists, and I know I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to share with us. I also just want to note one small change to our group of panelists. Eric Fetterman was scheduled to be a panelist, but he's unable to join us today for personal reasons. Finally, I want to thank an attorney who's not on the screen, but who was instrumental in helping make this event happen. We had this idea to ask ELI if we could do this a few months ago, and she just made it happen. She reached out to ELI and she's provided all the logistics along the way. So a special thanks to Emma, who I said is not on, but she's one of the attorneys in our Fisheries and Protected Resources Division. So thanks to Emma. So with that, I'm going to give a quick introduction about myself. Then we'll move to a presentation about NOAA, which will hopefully help inform some of our later discussion about our work with NOAA. And then you'll have a chance to hear from the panelists. We have both a set of prepared questions for the panelists, and as Chandler mentioned, we'll leave some time at the end for a Q&A, so please feel free to submit your questions. So a quick introduction about myself. As Chandler said, I'm the Deputy Section Chief of the Alaska section of NOAA's Office of General Counsel. Before that, I was an attorney advisor in the Alaska section. I joined NOAA's Office of General Counsel in 2015 through the Honors Attorney Program, where I completed rotations in the Enforcement, International, and Alaska sections. Before that, I was a law clerk for about 4 years. I clerked in the District Court and Court of Appeals. So I clerked for Judge Christina Rice of the United States District Court for the District of Vermont, and Judge Hall for the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. Before that, I was in law school. I went to law school at Vermont Law School, where I earned my JD and Masters of Environmental Law and Policy. And I completed my undergrad at my hometown college, Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado. I grew up hunting and fishing and camping and spending a lot of time outdoors. And I think that certainly informed my decision to pursue a career in environmental law. Given that background, I feel very privileged to work for NOAA GC, to work for an agency that is dedicated to the conservation and sustainable use of our natural resources, particularly our marine resources. And I didn't mention this at the outset, but I'm located here in Juneau, Alaska, where it's sunny and beautiful today. But I feel particularly lucky to work in Juneau with my NOAA colleagues and to be so close to the resources that we're charged with managing. We can watch fishing boats leaving the harbor and watch orcas in the channel from our offices. And I feel lucky to even be able to catch my own fish for dinner sometimes. So with that background, we'll launch into our presentation. NOAA has a fantastic mission of science, service, and stewardship. This mission makes NOAA the premier federal space, ocean, and coastal conservation and management agency. There are a number of line offices that support NOAA's mission. We're going to start with a quick overview of these line offices, which will help inform our discussion of our work later, since NOAA GC works closely with all of these line offices. National Marine Fisheries Service, you may know it also as NMFS or NOAA Fisheries, is responsible for the stewardship of our nation's ocean resources and habitat, primarily focused on the management of our sustainable fisheries and healthy ecosystems, as well as the recovery and conservation of what we call protected resources, which includes marine mammals protected under the Marine Mammal Protection Act and species listed under the Endangered Species Act. In its role in the fishery management process, NMFS, among other things, assesses the status of fish stocks, sets catch limits, and manages and regulates fisheries. A key partner in this endeavor includes the regional fishery management councils. The National Ocean Service provides science-based solutions through collaborative partnerships to address evolving economic, environmental, and social pressures on our oceans and coasts. Activities include partnering with states to promote restoration and sustainable development in coastal areas, overseeing the National Marine Sanctuary System, and developing nautical charts used for maritime navigation. The National Environmental Satellite Data and Information Service, also known as NESDIS, gathers and provides trusted environmental information for users around the world. Their work starts with collecting raw data from weather and other monitoring satellites and ends with providing vital products and services used daily across the country, including by the National Weather Service, other scientists across NOAA and throughout the US, the commercial sector, and private citizens. NESDIS operates our nation's weather satellites and maintains one of the most significant archives of environmental data in the world. Since I just mentioned the National Weather Service, I'll move to that line office, and it's probably the one everyone is most familiar with, since you might have used the Weather Service for a weather forecast. The service's focus is on a weather-ready nation. To that end, the Weather Service provides weather, water, and climate data forecasts and warnings for the protection of life and property and the enhancement of our national economy. The Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research conducts research to understand and predict the Earth system. They develop technology to improve NOAA's science, service, and stewardship, and they transition the results so they're useful to society. Their role is to provide unbiased science to better manage the environment nationally and globally, and to provide the research foundation for the understanding of the complex systems that support our planet. And finally, the Office of Marine and Aviation Operations manages and operates NOAA's fleet of research ships and aircraft. Their research and survey ships comprise the largest fleet of federal research ships in the nation and support a wide range of marine activities such as fisheries research, nautical charting, and ocean and climate studies. Their aircraft operate throughout the world, providing a wide range of capabilities such as hurricane reconnaissance and research, marine mammal and fisheries assessment, and coastal mapping. So with all that, you may be wondering, what is our role as NOAA GC? NOAA's Office of General Counsel provides legal advice to NOAA on a wide range of legal issues spanning the breadth of the agency's mission. This includes protecting and managing marine resources, conserving and managing ocean and coastal areas and marine sanctuaries, but this also includes things like implementing administrative and federal law requirements and procedures, enforcing NOAA regulations and laws under NOAA's jurisdiction, and assessing and seeking restitution from parties who damage NOAA managed resources. Our mission within NOAA GC is to deliver legal services to our clients within NOAA and within the line offices. We are committed to providing sound judgment, thoughtful analysis, and constructive advice through effective communication. In an environment fostering innovation and professional development, we apply the rule of law with integrity, respect for people, and commitment to excellence and the public trust. As you can imagine, we have a broad range of legal work, particularly in advising an agency whose reach goes from the surface of the sun to the depths of the ocean. NOAA's attorneys work in a wide variety of legal practice areas and with numerous associated statutes, treaties, regulations, and executive orders. This slide features a sampling grouped by some of our main practice areas, which include environmental and natural resources, administrative law, maritime and admiralty law, tribal law, international maritime law, and trade and commercial law. So what do our NOAA GC attorneys actually do on a daily basis across our legal practice areas and sections? You'll hear more from our expert panelists, but we've provided some examples here of the interesting things we get up to in support of the broader NOAA mission as we advise our NOAA line offices. Much of our work is focused on advising our clients in the interpretation of statutes, treaties, regulations, and executive orders, many of which were listed on the previous slide, and on advising our clients on draft regulations. A significant chunk of this regulatory work includes fisheries regulations promulgated by the National Marine Fisheries Service, but also other regulations such as those governing marine sanctuaries. In terms of client counseling, client service is really central to our legal practice. We often work very closely with scientists, such as biologists, oceanographers, and economists, as well as policymakers, regulatory writers, and technical staff within the agency. We also work closely with other federal officials and employees. This includes other attorneys within the Department of Commerce, as well as within the Department of Justice. In fact, attorneys in a number of our sections are often kept quite busy working with DOJ to help defend the agency's actions in litigation. We also interact with a wide diversity of NOAA stakeholders. This includes officials at other federal and state agencies, congressional staff, members of the regulated community, and representatives from public interest organizations. Finally, we also work with and interact with tribal officials and members from Indian tribes and Alaska Native tribes and communities. Okay. NOAA GC is led by our general counsel, who's a political appointee, and she is supported by 2 deputies, our deputy general counsel. The GC deputies and support staff work in a headquarters office in Washington, D.C., and the remainder of the staff, which includes attorneys, paralegals, and support staff, work in 13 different legal sections across the country. This organizational structure roughly aligns with the breadth of NOAA's own agency mission and geographical reach. While all of NOAA's work has a need for legal counsel at some point, the issue-based sections that you see listed here on this slide are structured to advise the NOAA line offices whose work most overlaps with specific legal regimes. So for example, enforcement, fisheries and protected resources, and the natural resources section primarily work with the National Marine Fisheries Service, while the natural resources and oceans and coast sections work primarily with the National Ocean Service. The weather, satellite, and research section works with the National Weather Service, the National Environmental Satellite Data and Information Service, and the Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research. Finally, there's a few sections listed on this slide, including the Environmental Review and Coordination section and the International section, whose work covers issues that span the work of NOAA. So NOAA itself is, there we go, okay. So NOAA itself is headquartered in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is in the DC metro area, and most of GC's issue-based sections that you saw listed on the previous slide are similarly based out of the DC metro area, either Silver Spring or DC. There's also 6 regional sections, which are listed on this slide. I work, as I said at the outset, in the Alaska section, which is located in Juneau, Alaska. Given the breadth of the National Marine Fisheries Service's engagement with stakeholders in federal fisheries and marine resource management across the country, these 6 regional sections work primarily with the National Marine Fisheries Service, along with one of the headquarters, or one of the Silver Spring, Maryland sections, the Fisheries and Protected Resources section. And you'll hear more from Andrea about this, but in addition, some sections like enforcement and natural resources have attorneys co-located in the regions. So I hope some of this information has sparked your interest, and you may be wondering, how can I work with NOAA GC? So currently we offer internships. A few sections offer internships on a regular basis, either just in the summer or both in the summer and over the school year. Other sections do offer internships on an ad hoc basis. All internships are run independently by each section, so you have to check with each section on the timing of the application period, requirements, etc. We also have an honors attorney program. We're going to go into more detail on the next slide, but recruitment is normally late summer and early fall for hiring the next fall. We will be recruiting this summer and fall for a fall of 2023. And then attorney, paralegal, and program support positions. There's no set schedule for hiring. We hire as needed. We do have some upcoming opportunities I'll mention here shortly, but just generally, if you're interested in applying, please check USA Jobs. We're also in the process of updating our website, and we expect to have links to job announcements and more complete information about career opportunities, so stay tuned. Our honors attorney program is an 18-month opportunity for entry-level attorneys to gain hands-on legal experience. It features 3 6-month rotations through different sections of NOAA GC with permanent placement in a section at the end of the program. As I mentioned, we generally recruit beginning in the late summer, early fall. For this upcoming cycle, we expect the official posting at the end of this summer, hopefully August. So keep an eye out on USA Jobs or on our NOAA GC webpage. I also mentioned that we have some upcoming opportunities. So we will be hiring in the near term in 3 sections: the environmental review and coordination section and 2 regional sections, Southwest and Alaska. Interested persons are free to reach out to the contacts that are listed on this slide for more information about NOAA GC and the specific section, but to apply, applicants must use the USA Jobs site and apply through that public-facing website. Okay, we're almost, I know everyone's excited to get to the panelists. We're almost there. We thought it might be helpful just to highlight some of the benefits of working at NOAA GC. I suspect you'll hear more from the panelists about some of the other benefits, but we wanted to highlight these here. For professional development opportunities, I wanted to note we do have an annual professional development program, which provides attorneys with the opportunity to complete details in other sections of NOAA GC with the Department of Commerce's Office of General Counsel or with other federal agencies, such as the Department of Justice and the US Coast Guard. And some of the attorneys on this panel have participated in this program. And then finally, we just wanted to touch briefly on diversity, equity, and inclusion. NOAA GC is committed to fostering an inclusive environment where we leverage diversity to achieve mission goals and maximize the potential of all individuals within NOAA GC. We are working to ensure that our practices and organizational culture reflect this commitment and create opportunities for all employees to fully contribute to the agency's mission and to serve the nation. As one component of this commitment, we have established a diversity, equity, and inclusion task force, which is comprised of attorneys, managers, and staff from all of the NOAA GC sections. The work of the task force is to increase awareness, target solutions, and provide a continuing focus on the broader issue of social equity and how it relates to NOAA GC and its practices. Some of the attorneys on this panel serve on that task force, and indeed the impetus for this event today stems from our work. Another product I just wanted to highlight briefly is our new ambassador program. Under this program, staff within NOAA GC, including attorneys, paralegals, program specialists, and managers, will be available to address questions about working for NOAA GC. And this program will launch in tandem with our newly revamped career opportunities page on our NOAA GC website. So stay tuned for that. And with that, we'll get to, I know what everyone is looking forward to. All right, so we're going to start with introductions, and I'll ask the panelists to talk about how did you get to NOAA and what are your main responsibilities. And I will turn it over to Andrea to go first.
Hey everybody, nice to see you today. My name is Andrea Hatton. I work for NOAA GC in the enforcement section. I guess I'll take Molly's bullet points there in reverse order and just share a little bit about what enforcement does. As an enforcement attorney, my primary job is essentially to serve as a civil administrative prosecutor. So we, the majority of our caseload here, I should say I office here in Alaska. So 2 enforcement attorneys are located in Alaska. And between the 2 of us, we handle a large number of civil administrative enforcement actions, meaning actions that we initiate and which the sanctions available to us comprise of either fines or financial sanctions or permit sanctions. A smaller portion of my work falls in the criminal realm. We do have some criminal cases that come out of NOAA GC. I'm cross-designated as a SALSA, which is a Special Assistant U.S. Attorney, and so I handle those cases in federal district court as well. I've been with NOAA GC for, and I should say there are additional components of my portfolio, but I might get to that later as an enforcement attorney. The bulk of our work is prosecuting cases. My path to NOAA GC, I've been here for 3 years. Prior to that, I worked for the U.S. Department of Justice for over 11 years. I served as a criminal prosecutor, an assistant U.S. attorney in 3 different judicial districts. Started on the southwest border, got to serve in Hawaii for 3 years, and then was fortunate to come home to Alaska. I'm from Fairbanks, Alaska, in 2015. Prior to being a prosecutor, like Molly, I clerked at the district court and at the Court of Appeals. Prior to law school at Seton Hall University in Newark, New Jersey, I worked for the Massachusetts Division of Energy Resources in Boston, and I did that right after I graduated from undergrad. So that's a overview of my background. I just wanted to also say that doing the work that we do, particularly having the opportunity to serve the nation here in Alaska, where my heart is and my roots are, is just truly an honor. And I'm just so pleased to be here today with my fellow panelists. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrea. I'll turn it over to Gladys. Oh, Gladys, I think you're still on mute.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well now? Thank you. Sorry about that. My name is Gladys Miles, and I am currently permanently located in the Oceans and Coast section. And as Molly indicated earlier, the Oceans and Coast section provides legal counsel and advice to the National Ocean Service. I always like to say the National Ocean Service has like the glossiest, pamphlets in the federal service, because our office provides legal advice and counsel to the National Marine Sanctuaries Program, and the National Marine Sanctuaries Program protects sorry, I'm drawing a blank. Protects our cultural resources in terms of like shipwrecks and things of that nature. We also have a National Marine Sanctuary in the Gulf of Mexico that protects coral habitats. We have one in Hawaii that protects humpback whales and other resources. We also provide advice and counsel to the Office of Ocean and Coastal Resource Management, as well as the Office of Coast Survey. In our Office of Coast Survey, there are charting folks that Molly mentioned earlier. In addition to working with the Oceans and Coast section, I am currently on detail with NOAA GC Fisheries and Protective Resource section. And right now, with regard to that section, I'm working on a number of wind-related litigation. NOAA provides incidental take authorizations to entities that are trying to develop wind resources, offshore wind resources, as part of the Biden and Harris administration's goal of deploying 30 gigawatts of offshore wind energy capacity by 2030. I came to NOAA in 2008. And prior to that, I worked for the Coast Guard for 11 and a half years. And prior to that, I went to law school at University of Dayton in Ohio. And for undergraduate, I went to Frostburg State University. One of the things that I like about my work with NOAA is that I am able to do different professional details and get experience doing other things. And so that's it, I think. Is there anything I missed?
Nope, I think you covered it. Thanks, Gladys. All right, we'll turn it over to Frank. Go ahead.
Thanks, Molly. I'm Frank Spertal. I'm with NOAA's Office of General Counsel. I'm in the Environmental Review and Coordination section. It's a relatively new section within NOAA GC. And as Molly alluded to earlier, we cover a variety of legal issues across all of NOAA. So we are not wedded to any one particular line office like Gladys's office and Andrea's office. So we help all of NOAA comply with a number of environmental laws, including the National Environmental Policy Act, among others. So I've been with GCERC, we call it, for about 5 years. Prior to that, I was in the enforcement section for almost 9 years in Silver Spring, Maryland. And as Andrea already alluded to, handled a lot of litigation during my tenure with enforcement, did international work, did rulemaking, and those kinds of things. Did a lot of Northeast region work, actually, during my tenure with enforcement. Prior to that, I was with the General Counsel for Fisheries and Protected Resources section for almost 8 years. That's where I started my career at NOAA when I came to the agency in the fall of 2000. At that time, there was a Department of Commerce Honors Attorneys program that I was a part of. And the theory there was to send us around, there were about 5 of us, to different bureaus within the Department of Commerce under which NOAA sits. And I went right to NOAA because I had clerked the prior summer with NOAA. I started in Fisheries and Protected Resources section as an honors attorney and just continued on in that office. Prior to law school, I was at the University of Oregon Law School prior to NOAA, and focused on ocean and coastal law there. And prior to that, I was at Oregon State University in the College of Oceanic and Atmospheric Sciences. So I got my master's degree in geological oceanography. I have a geology background, so that's what I majored in college at Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin. And like Gladys, I did a detail assignments since I've been with GC, one with the U.S. Coast Guard for about 14 months and the Environmental Law Division there, and then another one with the Legislative Division at the Department of Commerce General Counsel. So yeah, just really honored to be here with my other panelists, and super excited to answer whatever questions you might have. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Frank. Yeah, and I'll put in a plug again. If you guys have questions, please start sending them in. So we'll turn to our next prepared question for the panelists. And the question is, what do you enjoy most about your work at NOAA GC? And I guess maybe we won't go in exactly the same order. We'll start with we'll go Gladys, Frank, and then Andrea. So Gladys, do you want to kick it off?
What I enjoy most about working for NOAA GC is the fact that we do have various offices, and you find that even though I'm in Oceans and Coast section, a lot of the issues that we deal with tend to overlap. And so you get an opportunity to collaborate with others within the office. So for me, it's just the ability to collaborate with other individuals just to achieve like one single goal, and that's really to protect the resources.
Okay, Frank, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Molly. I think just adding on to what Gladys already said, yeah, collaboration is a big part of my job now in ERC. I also like the issues that we have a chance to work on. A lot of them are really cutting edge legal issues, and also just supporting the work that our client offices do. Because my science background, I have a particular interest in a lot of the work that NOAA does, and so just from an academic and professional standpoint, I'm just really interested in the research and other work that NOAA does, and supporting that through the legal work that we do in GC, and the wide range of issues that we get a chance to work on. So we're not just pigeonholed into one particular issue or area. You really become kind of a generalist in many ways, and you get a chance to work on lots of different things, regardless, I think, of which GC office you work on. So yeah, I think that about does it. Thanks, Molly.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Over to you, Andrea.
Okay, thanks, Molly. Yes, I think, like Gladys and Frank, I really appreciate the mission of the agency, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of being hopefully helpful to our client, my client office. I would say too, the variety of legal issues is and just really fantastic. I like a lot of variety in my work. I always have. And I'll say in all candor, having come over from the Justice Department, where there is a very large variety of issues, particularly if you're in a U.S. Attorney's Office, I did wonder how that would play out here. And it has just been rich and diverse, and constantly something new popping up that is just very interesting, challenging, and rewarding work. The other thing I would note for sure is just the collegiality of the NOAA GC attorneys and support staff is superb. The quality of the lawyers that we have at NOAA GC is just fantastic, and just really enjoy the work atmosphere.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. I'll since Eric's not here, maybe I'll just take the opportunity to add in my own thoughts. I echo everything that Gladys, Frank, and Andrea said, and I do think the aspect about our job that I enjoy the most is the work that we do, but also our colleagues, both within NOAA's Office of General Counsel and just across NOAA. We do have a very collaborative environment. As I mentioned at the outset, for example, the regional sections plus Fisheries and Protected Resources section all advise the National Marine Fisheries Service. And so you can imagine there's a need that we're in alignment and we're not giving conflicting or confusing advice. And so we have to collaborate a lot. And there's just I think because of that, a very collegial, open environment across NOAA, GC. In terms of working with NMFS, I'll just share one of the things I mentioned earlier is that the National Marine Fisheries Service sets catch limits. Part of my portfolio is advising the Alaska region on their specification of the catch limits that govern the groundfish fisheries off of Alaska. Part of that process involves working with the state of Alaska and colleagues within the Alaska Fisheries Science Center and across NMFS. It involves biologists, stock assessment authors who are like statisticians and experts in biology and are just insanely qualified individuals. It involves, can't remember if I said economists, oceanographers, everyone is at the table. There's 30, 40 people working on this issue of what biologically should the catch limits be set at, but also what are the ramifications in the communities across Alaska and other communities outside of Alaska that are dependent on fishing. What are the actual on the ground impacts economically and socially? And just that there's so many individuals within NOAA, within the Alaska Fisheries Science Center and NIMS, National Marine Fisheries Service, sorry, I'm trying not to use acronyms, that are dedicated to this singular task, and the quality of the work that they produce, the environment in which they produce it, which is again very collegial. I think that's what I enjoy most, is just working in this environment that's very collaborative and collegial, and working with such high quality and high caliber individuals across NOAA GC and with our different line offices. So, okay. Our next question is, what do you find most interesting or challenging about working with a government agency client? And I think this time we'll start with Frank, then go Andrea, Gladys. So Frank, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Molly. I think one of the challenges is the sometimes resources can be a challenge. That is, there's just not enough of us to do all the work that has to be done. And we feel it on the GC side, we also feel it on the client side. And so everyone's trying to do the best they can with what they have. And sometimes it seems like it's never enough, but that's, I think, universal across government, not unique to NOAA. And I think also because a lot of the issues are novel and kind of cutting edge, you're kind of you're at the tip of the spear on a lot of these legal issues you're working on. So you don't have a lot of precedent or background to fall back on, if you will. So you have to kind of get creative and use the skill sets you do have to come up with solutions for the client so that they can do the job that they need to do. And this is true on the domestic side and on the international side too. I've had a chance to work on U.S. delegations for International Fishing Commission meetings, and you're really kind of providing legal advice on the fly, if you will, at meetings like that. Same thing with council meetings that I alluded to. So or enforcement actions if you're at a hearing or whatever. Having to kind of think critically and think on your feet. So those are just kind of some of the challenges we face. I don't know if they're unique to NOAA, but those are some of the things that I found. On the flip side, it can also be extremely rewarding because you do have a lot of flexibility and freedom to provide that kind of advice. And I think it really develops you as a person, as a lawyer, to have that kind of skill set. So those are some of my thoughts. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I guess my answer is pretty similar to Frank's. I feel like the most interesting part of the job is the diversity of assignments, but at times those can be, because at least in enforcement, they can be required totally different things. And so, for example, if you have a case going to hearing or is in litigation, in whatever venue, those deadlines and whatnot may not totally gel with an international fisheries commission, the responsibilities and work that needs to go into that. So juggling those competing projects, if you will, at least competing for your time, can be challenging, but it is, in my view, absolutely what makes this job so interesting, is the opportunity to not only have a case before going to a hearing before an ALJ or a district judge, but also be working on a interesting reg package that has real deadlines, and be providing advice to, for example, the International Pacific Halibut Commission is one that we have responsibility for up here. So two sides of the coin. I guess that would be my answer to that question. Thanks.
Thank you, Molly. For me, I believe that the most interesting yet challenging things in our job is, earlier I had spoken about collaborating within NOAA. Well, we also collaborate and cooperate outside of NOAA too. Some of the sister agencies that we work with are BOEM, which I had mentioned earlier on. We work with US Coast Guard, US EPA, Marine Mammal Commission, Fish and Wildlife Service, and everything like that. And sometimes our missions or our objectives do not clearly align. And so it requires you to like negotiate with your sister agencies so that you can, to the extent possible, make sure that there's a win-win for all of the agencies involved. And for me, I believe that that's one of the most challenging things, but also it also has given me an opportunity to develop relationships outside of my own agency. One of the ways that I learned about NOAA is through the work that I was doing with the Coast Guard at the time. I worked in the ALJ office, and we were hearing and adjudicating NOAA fishery enforcement cases. And so that's when I first learned about NOAA. So that helped me to develop some connections and helped me to bridge over to NOAA. But as I mentioned, sometimes it can be challenging, especially when, you know, you and your sister agency does not always see eye to eye. And how about you, Molly? What do you find most challenging and interesting?
Oh, thanks, Gladys. Yeah, so I think it's the same for both. It's the diversity of our work. So we, as you guys could probably glean from the slides and from our discussion, NOAA's work touches a lot of different things, from space all the way to, you know, studying things on the bottom of the ocean floor. So even in my practice area, I primarily work with the National Marine Fisheries Service, and I alluded to this earlier. There's sort of two houses our work. There's mainly kind of two main clients or two houses. There's fisheries and then protected resources. So I work both with fisheries and then both with protected resources, as do many of the attorneys in the Alaska section. So there's just always a diversity of issues arising under the primary statute governing fisheries is the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act, and then for the protected resources side, it's the Marine Mammal Protection Act and Endangered Species Act. So there's always a diversity of issues cropping up and really fascinating issues. So it keeps our job very interesting. But I think that's also challenging. It can be challenging to stay up to date on all the, you know, the changes in the law. It can be really challenging to delve into some of the more technical aspects of our client's job. For example, I mentioned the work I do with the specifications process for catch limits for groundfish. The stock assessment process is very technical, and there's a lot of math and there's a lot of biology. And even as like, you know, we all think, oh, we're so well educated as attorneys. Whew, I haven't had math since undergrad. So, you know, this complicated math is just, it seems to go over my head. But, you know, it's wading into those super technical details. It's challenging, but it's also interesting. So I think it's the diversity of the work for me that is both the most interesting and most challenging component. So, okay, we'll move on to our next question. And this question, I've been looking through the questions that we've been getting from the audience, and a lot of folks have been asking about this. So I think this question will touch on a lot of the questions we've been getting from the audience. Essentially, what suggestions would you give to law students or current attorneys who are interested in entering federal practice? And a lot of the questions we've gotten have specifically asked about wanting to join NOAA GC. So we'll start with Andrea this time and then go to Gladys and Frank.
Thanks, Molly. Well, I guess I'll take those separately. For law students, my advice would be to just keep an open mind about what might interest you. You know, looking back on it, I actually went into law school thinking I wanted to do natural resources law, but the first half of my career I ended up being a criminal prosecutor. And I think one thing that really helped me, and the reason that was sort of funny, was that in law school, I really disliked criminal law. But what ended up happening is I had the opportunity to work for a judge. So my advice for law students is keep an open mind, think broadly about internships, externships in law school that might be of interest to you. And after school, if it's an option, pursue a state or federal or even administrative clerkship, because those experiences really do afford not only the opportunity to be exposed to a huge variety of legal issues. So for example, in my case, I ended up realizing through my district court clerkship, which piles on my desk was I so eager to dive into, and which ones not so much. And it turned out for a variety of reasons, the criminal workload really grabbed me. So for that reason, but also because of the mentorship opportunities that come with positions like that. And it truly has been something throughout my federal career that has continued to be a huge help to me. Those judges and even folks I worked for in law school as an intern extern. So for law students, cast a wide net, and if you have the opportunity to clerk, do it. For folks who are already attorneys and are looking to transition, I guess I would just say there as well, to cast a wide net, and it can be very helpful to get into the federal service. It could really give you a leg up if you, for example, are then looking to pivot, like Gladys did, it sounds like I did. Once you're in the system, it really can be helpful to build those relationships. And so to cast a wide net, get your foot in the door and be open to new opportunities. I would say this too, although I did have the opportunity after undergrad to work for an environmental agency in Massachusetts, I am not somebody who, like Frank, has a scientific background. It took me a long road to get to NOAA. And so, there can be all different sorts of opportunities. Sometimes the agency needs somebody with more of a science a background. That's not why I was hired, I can assure you of that. But I had another skill set that I brought with me that was, I think, made me a stronger candidate for a particular position at a particular time. So all this to say, don't count yourself out for a particular agency like NOAA if you don't have that technical background. So those would be a few thoughts. Thank you.
And I'll echo the same thing that Andrea said, definitely cast a wide net. I know when I first started law school, I thought I was going to become a transactional attorney. I had worked for Ryland Mortgage Company doing basically buying and selling loans. And so I thought that that's where I was going to go. But while I was in law school, I became particularly interested in litigation that was going on in Ohio involving the placement of dump sites and landfills in minority communities, and the application of the Civil Rights Act to that. So that was like the first inklings of environmental justice. And so that really had me pivot and say, hey, wait a minute, I don't think I like that transactional stuff that much. And so once I learned about the litigation that was going on, I went and spoke to the professor that was head of the environmental and natural resources courses in my law school. It was a very small law school. And he suggested that I put together a symposium. And I'd never done a symposium before. He's like, oh, reach out to these people, and so I did that, and I put together my first symposium. And that also led me to doing an internship at the EPA. Again, my focus initially when I walked into law school was not environmental related. But I went to EPA. I did a summer internship with the EPA. I also did a summer internship with, I live in Maryland, and so the Maryland Attorney General's office has an office that deals with environmental stuff. So I worked with them for a while as well, doing an unpaid internship. And for me, deciding to do an unpaid internship I was like, oh, how am I going to do it? How am I going to make this work? But in the evenings, I would do my internship during the day, and then in the evening, I would go work at the mall, in one of the clothing stores in the mall. And so that's how I made it happen for myself. And once I graduated from law school, I really wasn't looking at the Coast Guard to start my career, and I was concerned that the position that I was going to accept was going to be a term appointment. Meaning that it was only going to be for only 2 years, but I still decided, hey, let me take a chance with this. And fortunately, they were able to create a career ladder for me. So like, cast your net as wide as possible. Don't say no to any opportunities. Andrea suggested looking into federal clerkship and state clerkships, but I would also encourage you to look at local clerkships for those who are in law school. I worked for a common pleas, like district court type in Ohio, and that gave me experience that made me like a good candidate when I started applying for a lot of my positions. So I would suggest do the same thing. And then for experienced attorneys, you already have like the skill sets that you need. You can communicate, you have strong writing skills, just sell that. And I think you should be able to find a foot in the door in the federal government, if that's what your desire is. Thank you.
Frank,
Yeah.
over to you.
Yeah, without really repeating what Gladys and Andrea already said, I agree that diversity of experience is probably the most important thing. There are a few of us in GC that have technical backgrounds, but that I think is more the exception than the rule. I think most people come in with broad legal experience, whether they got it through working in the private sector or through a clerkship or with another agency. Or even with a program office. We have a couple of NOAA lawyers that had law degrees, but they went and worked for a line office and got experience that way, and then transitioned to NOAA GC. So I think the takeaway message for both law students rather and experienced attorneys is that there are many paths to NOAA GC. You don't have to be born an oceanographer to get into NOAA GC. Like I said, I think that's more the exception than the rule, and really kind of finding your way and your passion. And a lot of what we do, the basis of what we do is administrative law. It's not the most, it's an important foundational structure upon which all environmental laws are based. So that's if you're in law school, I think having an admin law course is probably a great start to see if, that's the kind of law that you want to practice. But yeah, just echoing what others have already said, I think diversity of experience and highlighting examples of your work and skill sets that you can bring is really important too. Thanks.
Thanks, Frank. A bit out of order. I want to ask a follow-up question because you touched on it. We have some questions from the audience about how important it is to have a technical background. And I think you had spoken, Frank, to your undergrad. But yeah, I guess I wanted to ask that question from the audience now, since you had just touched on it. How important is it to have a technical background, either in marine science or the legal experience before joining NOAA GC? Frank, do you want to take a stab at that one first? And then if other panelists want to weigh in, go ahead.
I think it can help, depending on the nature of the work that you do in NOAA GC. I mean, Molly already talked about stock assessments. So sure, if you've got a math background or statistics background or a biology background, I think it helps you understand the science that's underpinning the regulations that you're reviewing. I think that's where having a technical background can help. So you're not on such a steep learning curve with just the subject matter that you're doing legal work for. So, and also understanding kind of how science works and how scientists work and how to communicate with scientists. I also think having a technical background, although it's not specific to that, is learning how to write clearly and succinctly in plain language. That was something that was drilled into me by my advisor in graduate school is writing in a way that a family member can understand what you're saying. And I think that's applicable whether you're in science or law or any profession really, is being able to clearly communicate with the audience and know the audience that you're communicating to. So, I think it can't help having a technical background. You certainly will understand, I think, some of the science more clearly and be able to ask questions that you might not be able to if you didn't have it. But I don't think it's a critical element. And like I said earlier, most folks in NOAA GC do not. They might have undergraduate backgrounds in a science, but a lot of them don't, and they're just fine. I don't think they offer any lesser legal advice than someone that does. So I hope that helps things.
Yes,
Yeah, I tend to agree with Frank regarding that. I think it does help to have one, but I don't think that it'll kill your career opportunities. I, for instance, do not have a science background. My major was in psychology with a minor in criminal justice, and I went to work. One of my first jobs out of undergraduate was working for a real estate mortgage company. So so it doesn't hurt. It can always help to have it, but it's not crucial. It's not critical. The great thing about working at NOAA is that you have the scientists who are the experts, and sometimes, and don't be afraid to ask what might be like the dumb questions, because there are none. And so sometimes if I'm like reading through something and I don't understand it, I will set up a call and say, hey, walk me through this. Like, explain this to me as you would, your 20-year-old son or daughter. And they're willing to take that time to explain things to you. So I would not allow the fact that you don't have a science background hinder you from applying for any positions that might be available at NOAA.
I would just add, as somebody in Gladys's lane, but also somebody who has been involved in hiring at NOAA, I would say if you have that background, you should certainly highlight that in a cover letter. If you don't have that background, I think it's really important to highlight why you're interested in NOAA GC, why you're interested in working at NOAA. Having worked at different places, that is something that matters to NOAA. It seems to me, as somebody who's still relatively new here, but I think it is something that surprises hiring panels at NOAA GC, that more folks who apply aren't explaining, why is it that they really want to do this work. So I would say more than some other organizations I've worked for, I would be sure to highlight that, why you're interested in a particular position and working for NOAA in general. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. I'll offer a few of my thoughts. With regard to the follow-up question I just asked Frank about, what sort of technical experience, I absolutely agree. If you have some technical experience, whether it's math, science, you should certainly highlight it in either your cover letter or your resume. but if you don't have it, it's not prohibitive. And I would say the same thing for like the legal background. There's not a lot of attorneys who practice Magnuson-Stevens Act law apart from NOAA attorneys. So we're not going to get attorneys who have a wide depth of experience in the Magnuson-Stevens Act, and even similarly with some of our other practice areas. So it's not necessary that you have had experience with all of the statutes that we work with. That said, there are a few that we work with a lot, and Frank mentioned that a lot of our work is in the practice of administrative law. And so I know some of the questions have come in, are there any classes I should take? Having a class in administrative law or NEPA, FOIA, any classes or background or experience in that is certainly going to help. We've touched on a lot of the really fun work we do working with our line offices, but a significant chunk of the work that we do is, NEPA, FOIA. There's a bunch of other federal statutes that we won't bore you with, but I'll just mention things like the Paperwork Reduction Act and the Regulatory Flexibility Act. So at the end of the day, I don't think it's so much having experience in all of those statutes necessarily. If you do have it, I would highlight it. I think what we're looking for are the basic skills that an attorney should have, that you're able to conduct research, that you're able to write well, and then just a lot of soft skills, that you're comfortable collaborating with your colleagues, that you're comfortable working with clients. That I think that was one of the hardest parts about my transition clerking for 4 years. When you're a law clerk, you're in your little silo and you just have one person you have to make happy, the judge that you're clerking for. And then transitioning to NOAA, there's just a lot of complexity within the agency, as Gladys mentioned, outside of the agency, working with some of our sister agencies in Alaska. One of our partners is the state of Alaska, but there's a lot of complexity there in that federal-state relationship. So having those skills or be willing to develop those skills in terms of, managing some tense relationships, being able to collaborate, things like that. Yeah, and then I think the last thing I wanted to touch on was something Andrea mentioned. We do want people who want to be here, are excited about the work, and are willing to learn. And so one suggestion that I would offer to folks is to include in your cover letter why you're interested in NOAA. Do a little research. Hopefully this has helped. But do a little research, find something that makes you excited about NOAA and highlight that if you're not that familiar with NOAA or the work in NOAA GC. Yeah, we want people who want to be here and are excited about the work. I think that's all I had. So that's it for our prepared questions. We've received a lot of questions from the audience, and I've been trying to organize them. I want to start with, we received a lot of questions about the honors attorney program, and I wanted to tick through some of those quickly. So as I mentioned, I did participate in the honors attorney program. That's how I joined NOAA. So one of the questions was about clerkships, and had noted that it sounds like a lot of folks have done clerkships before joining NOAA or before joining the honors attorney program. And the question is essentially, should I do a clerkship first before I try to apply to NOAA? And I would say it all depends. I think Andrea and I and Gladys, I think we can all speak to how valuable a clerkship can be in terms of really learning the fundamentals of being a lawyer, learning how to do that research, learning how to write well. But it's definitely not a prerequisite for joining NOAA or for joining NOAA through the honors attorney program. So I think it really depends on what experience you're looking for in your legal career. And if a clerkship sounds like something you want to do, I would say by all means go for it, but it's not a prerequisite. So another question is, how many honors attorneys are hired every year, and in particular for this upcoming year? This is a difficult question. It really depends. As I said at the outset, we're pretty, in terms of a solicitor's office or office of general counsel that advises a federal agency, we're pretty small. We're probably around 100 attorneys, maybe a little bit less. So we don't have a lot of headroom, and we have to plan out how many people we can actually hire, because one of the benefits to the NOAA Honors Program is that you're permanently assigned to NOAA GC at the end of the rotation. So we strive for 2 to 4. There have been times where we've only hired 1 honors attorney. And yeah, so the short answer is I can't give you a definitive answer how many honors attorneys we'll be able to hire for the upcoming cycle, but it's, I would say, between 1 and 4. One person asked, how do you get to decide what rotations you do? We ask the honors attorneys to submit their requests for which sections they would like to rotate through. And then those, we try to honor those requests, but they're based on also the needs of the section. You know, I think you've heard that we have a lot of attorneys who move around through NOAA GC, both permanently and on rotations. You know, and there's people coming and going, and so sometimes a section will need support, and that's where an honors attorney might end up. So the idea, both with your rotations and with your permanent selection, is that we try to honor your requests, but it's also based on the needs of NOAA GC at the time. And then I think there's just one more honors question, 2 more honors questions. So one question is, are recent law school graduates eligible? Yes. Third-year law students and graduate law students are eligible, but also eligible are folks who've graduated recently, but have in the intervening period after graduation and before applying have completed either judicial clerkships or legal fellowships. And then the last question that's, I think, was honors attorney specific, but might be broader to hiring, is what training does NOAA GC provide for new attorneys? And for the honors program, NOAA GC does try to provide some training. It's, you know, it's helpful that you kind of have this infusion of a few new attorneys at the same time, and so you can offer training. I think in every year we have tried to offer some basic training on FOIA, administrative records, NEPA. I know in my year we had a training on the National Marine Sanctuaries Act and the Magnuson-Stevens Act. So we try to offer some training. You know, I know it's tougher when we have new attorneys on board in the sections. I don't know if we've always been great at it, but it's one of the things that we've identified in our work in the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force, is that we need to have a more robust onboarding program and offer some training, I guess offer more structure, because it has been a bit ad hoc. There has been training offered, but it's certainly something that we know we can improve. We also try and offer mentoring for new attorneys and honors attorneys. So I'd say, you know, we try to do a good job, but there's room for improvement. So I know that was quick. I wanted to tick through some of the honors attorneys questions. I don't know if anyone else has, to the extent that some of those questions were a bit broader than the honors attorney program, feel free, Gladys, Frank, or Andrea, to jump in. Otherwise, I can pull another question from the audience. Okay, so one of the questions from the audience that I think would be great to answer, and we actually talked about it a bit in previous discussions about whether to include it as a prepared question, but just touching on the aspect of joining the federal government or NOAA GC versus a different career, and how feasible is that for current law students who are coming out of law school with a lot of debt, and you know, taking a job with the federal government where it looks like the pay is a lot less than going to perhaps a private firm. So if anyone on the panel wants to speak to the feasibility of joining NOAA and maybe what some of the benefits are of joining the federal government versus going into private practice.
So I think the greatest benefit about joining the federal government as opposed to going to private practice is that you do have a lot of flexibility over your schedule. You're not working towards billable hours and everything like that. So there's a lot of, you know, work-life balance is what I was looking for. When I started with the federal government as a lawyer, or actually I started when I was at the Coast Guard initially. When I was hired as a GS-11 law clerk, because when you first come out of law school, if you haven't passed the bar, they hire you as a GS-11 law clerk, or GS-11 or 12 on your experience. And at that time, which was a long time ago, it was like my salary was like $39,000, less than $39,000 a year. You know, you have law school loans that are coming due within 6 months after graduation and everything like that. But there's ways that you can make it work. A lot of lenders offer programs where you like consolidate your debt, you can extend your payments and things of that nature. And did work part-time for a few years working as a lawyer. It all depends on what you want to do, but if the federal government is what you want to do, then you can definitely make it happen, and you can definitely have work for you. The great thing about being in the federal government is while I started very low, every year or so I had a bump in salary, either by grade or by step. And so within the federal government, there's like, within a grade, there's like 10 steps. And so some of those steps are automatically where, you know, every year initially up until I think like the third or fourth year, you get a raise every year. And then like you have what you call grades, where you can jump from like a GS-11. When I first came in as a law clerk, I was a GS-11. And then as soon as I got my law degree, they bumped me up to a 12. And so there are ways that you can make it happen. And you go through the grades relatively quickly. And I have nothing else to add.
Frank or Andrea, did you want to add anything, or?
Yeah, I think, you know, that's such a personal decision in terms of, certainly when it comes to finances and debt load and that kind of thing, and where your comfort level lies. I think the benefits of working as a federal employee is that you get a wide range of experience early on in your career, and you get a lot of responsibility. You know, I have friends of mine that are in the private sectors, and they're partners, and you know, we compare notes, and you know, I hear what they're doing and what I'm doing, and you know, we do a lot of hands-on legal work, and that's true whether you start as a GS 11 or 12 versus a GS 15. You're doing legal work. You're writing briefs. You're reviewing regulations. You're writing memos. You're writing memorandum of agreements. You know, those kinds of things. So there's a lot of legal work that you continue doing throughout your career, in addition to building on those soft skills that we touched on earlier, and being able to communicate, collaborate with people. There's also public interest loan forgiveness programs that agencies have. So that's something else if you're concerned on the finance side of things, you know, whether it's something I can afford long term, that's a program to look into, where your loan debt can be forgiven after a period of time. You know, so that's something that if you have federal student loans to definitely look into. But you know, and so I think that's a very personal decision, and there's pros and cons, obviously. But getting legal work early on in your career, I think, is really important. And I think the federal government is a great place to do that. Thanks.
Yeah, I guess I would just echo everything that Gladys and Frank said, and also just note some of the benefits, obviously, that come with working for the federal government. And if you know you want to end up in federal service, starting sooner than later can have real world benefits to you in terms of, you know, I'm sure our audience is probably far from retirement, and so am I, but it is something to think about. If you have the ability to do it, you know that's where you want to be. There's a lot of sense in trying to get in if everything else lines up for you sooner rather than later.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And I'll just note, one of the audience members was asking for clarification about the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. And yes, work with NOAA's Office of General Counsel does qualify as qualifying service for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. And I know there's a few of us who are relying on that program or involved in that program. Okay, we have a real smattering of questions, and I've been trying to figure out what to focus on next. But so some of the questions have talked about what kind of work would you expect as an entry-level attorney? What does your day look like? And I thought maybe we could answer both of those questions. Of what kind of work would you expect as an entry-level attorney, and what do we do on a day-to-day basis? So I will start with Andrea and then go to Gladys and Frank.
Okay. Well, you know, I think I'll leave my section might be a little bit different. And, you know, I came in mid-career, so maybe I'll leave the entry-level questions to some of the other panelists. I'll just speak to a typical day. For my part, I don't have one for the most part, which is why I love my job so much. It really depends on what projects are, you know, on my plate at any given week or series of weeks. So if I have a case that is set for hearing, I may be drafting briefs, interviewing witnesses. More typically, I'm looking at investigative packages that are prepared by the NOAA Office of Law Enforcement, and I'm looking at them, you know, with an eye towards what violation do they establish, what follow-up might be necessary, is there any violation at all, what about the statute of limitations, you know, that's probably the very first question, et cetera, and then summarizing what we have, making a recommendation to headquarters as to how to charge, whether to charge, that sort of legal work, researching, of course, legal issues that I am spotting in that investigative package to make sure that that my boss has a clear view of the strengths and weaknesses of a particular case. I might be doing that. I might be answering questions that are getting posed to me by enforcement officers who are on the water, dealing with real vessels and real fishers up here in Alaska. This is a particularly busy season for us, as you might imagine, with the charter season in full swing, plus the commercial season. Just a couple weeks ago, you know, we deal with, you know, real world problems. We've encountered X. We want to know if we can seize Y, why or why not. So that a question like that took up a great part of my time last week. So that put everything else on my to-do list over to the side. I tackled that. But as I said earlier, I really enjoy that kind of diversity. So I can't say that I have a typical day. As I said, it really depends on really what has come in the door and needs to be reprioritized at a given time. So probably not the most helpful answer, but it's best I can do, I guess.
So like Andrea, I transitioned from the Coast Guard to NOAA. So I didn't come in as an entry-level attorney. I came in as an experienced attorney. And one of the things that I did in the Oceans and Coast section, one of the things we do is we handle administrative appeals either under the CZMA, that's the Coastal Zone Management Act, Sanctuary, National Marine Sanctuary Act appeals, as well as some of the fishery enforcement appeals after it's left the ALJ's office. And so when I started at NOAA, one of the first things that I worked on was a huge Coastal Zone Management Act appeal. And there was a challenge to a federal consistency determination. And so that basically had me doing what I was doing at the Coast Guard initially, which was, reviewing materials that were brought in by parties, advising, because the Secretary of Commerce, well, the Undersecretary, NOAA administrator, was one who is the decision maker on some of those appeals. And so advising her and things of that nature. But in addition to that, like Andrea, my day, I could be working on a National Marine Sanctuary issue, which involves like a rulemaking to, providing advice to individuals responding to, like, for instance, today, one of the things that happened is there was a report that we have to prepare for Congress dealing with the work that we've done on harmful algal blooms. And so reviewing that report for legal sufficiency is one of the things that I was working on. And earlier on today, we also had a hearing involving in the District Court of Massachusetts on one of our wind litigation. So each day it's different. One of the great thing about NOAA is you have a very diverse portfolio, so you're never bored at all. And so, yeah. Frank?
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I came in as a junior lawyer, and when I came on board NOAA GC, I was assigned regulations to review and congressional correspondence and all kinds of things that fishery management plans, that kind of thing that my office was working on. And so really, the kind of work that I was doing was more or less in alignment with what more senior people were doing. I just had to kind of learn as I went along and ask lots of questions and that kind of thing. So it was kind of jump right in with both feet kind of situation. But it was a good learning experience. And like Gladys and Andrea already alluded to, your day is never set. Things roll in. My office is heavily involved in infrastructure. It's a high priority for the Biden administration. So we work in conjunction with the Department of Interior and other agencies on a variety of infrastructure projects. NOAA is a consulting agency for those projects. So we consult under the Endangered Species Act and the Marine Mammal Protection Act on the impacts of offshore wind, for example, on critters living in the ocean, whether they're whales or porpoises or fish habitat, that kind of thing. So, there's a lot of work and it's high pay, it's tight deadlines in many cases. If it's something that's congressionally driven, of course, there's legislation to review. So there's really a wide range of things that can fill up your day. And, you really kind of never know what each day brings. You kind of have your short-term, medium-term, and long-term projects and a to-do list that never seems to quite be, finished. But that's what makes life interesting. Thanks.
Thanks. I'll just add, joining as an honors attorney, I did join as a very, very entry-level attorney. And, I guess this harkens back to what we've already touched on. I hadn't taken ocean and coastal law in law school. I had interned for the Windsor County State's Attorney's Office, which was, a state or county prosecutor's office, and I had interned for the Natural Resources Defense Council. But most of my work there had involved the Clean Air Act. So I had no background in the Magnuson-Stevens Act, the Endangered Species Act. And yeah, I just joining with the honors program, they do really give you that hands-on legal experience right from the outset. And it's jumping in with both feet, but also not entirely drowning. There's lots of support. As I mentioned, we had some training. There mentoring. We had mentors, but I think I guess I can't speak to how it works at other agencies or even, outside of federal service, but one of the things I most valued about being in the honors attorney program was they were giving us substantive work right from the outset. It wasn't just, like a glorified internship, not meaning that in a derogatory way. Internships are very valuable, but it was really trying to both give you the opportunity to learn what it is a NOAA GC attorney does, but also teaching you how to be a good attorney within NOAA GC. So I think just generally joining NOAA as an entry-level attorney, whether it's an honors attorney or even, when we hire for attorney positions, often we're hiring folks with some experience, but like I've already said, they don't have experience in the Magnuson-Stevens Act. So they're, I guess, technically entry level in terms of a lot of our substantive practice areas. I know we're getting close to the end of our time. There were some questions about internships, and I'll just note with regard to whether internships are remote or virtual. For the most part, all of the sections now are offering remote or virtual internships. We, like a lot of folks, learned during the pandemic that we can do a lot of our job virtually or remotely. But it is, as I said earlier, right now the internships are all run by each section, and that's independently. So if there's a particular section you're interested in, you should confirm with them if it's offered virtually. And then just one other question we received in a few different iterations was, what's the best way to join NOAA GC? Should I join through the honors program? Should I get experience? Should I maybe try the Sea Grant or Knaus Fellow route? And just speaking candidly, it's a very competitive environment. I think across the board, it's very competitive to get into NOAA GC. So I think if you're interested in working for NOAA, I would apply to whatever opportunities you are eligible for and try to get in that way. If you're still in law school, I would consider an internship or other opportunities to work with NOAA GC or sort of NOAA adjacent, whether it's another federal agency or an NGO that does some of our legal work. Yeah, so that's, I think, kind of the questions I wanted to get through, although there were so many questions, and thank you everyone in the audience for submitting questions. I had a concluding thought. I just wanted to thank everyone for their participation, thank the audience, thank ELI. But I don't know if Gladys, Frank, or Andrea, you have any quick concluding thoughts before we end?
Yeah, Molly, you mentioned the Knaus Fellowship. That's a really great way of getting your foot in the door in the marine field. If you're at all interested in that, you can be placed on the Hill. You can be placed in an agency like NOAA, and it's a well-recognized program. So that's another way to get into NOAA GC.
I would also suggest that you do a lot of informational interviews using the connections that you currently have. I know for me, I was successful in getting into NOAA GC just by doing informational interviews. I mean, I was at the Coast Guard, we were already handling fishery enforcement cases, and other opportunities were happening in different offices. And so I would just reach out to attorneys that I knew in those offices and say, hey, what's going on? Tell me a little bit about the work that you do. There's a lot of value in doing things like that. It shows that you have an interest in the work that NOAA does, and then your name becomes recognized, and I'll be like, hey, I know this person. I've worked with her on a number of different projects before. So informational interviews are important as well if you can't get into an internship or Knaus Fellowship or any other of those other fellowships that were mentioned before.
I think that's great advice. both Frank and Gladys. And I would say too, if nothing else, even if you don't have those pre-established relationships and your name isn't out there yet, the information you'll get from an informal chat with a NOAA GC attorney is going to really help you write a more compelling cover letter, because it's going to demonstrate your interest and it's going to demonstrate your understanding of the work we do. And I can assure you that that will certainly distinguish you from a lot of other applicants, just as a starting point. So that's all I had. Thanks, Molly.
Yeah, thanks. I will definitely echo what Andrea said in terms of, you know, it is very competitive, and so we're looking for people who stand out on your cover letter. So being able to, you know, explain why you want to be at NOAA GC and that you have some background or understanding of the work we do is very helpful. I think we're at time.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. I will keep my remarks short, but just want to say thank you so much for our fantastic panelists, and we're so thrilled to have had this opportunity with NOAA today. A special thank you to Frank, Gladys, Molly, and Andrea. We just really appreciate your time and so grateful to have this opportunity together. Thank you all so much.